We'll move straight on to onto Q&A now. We've had a series of questions come in. I'll start run through a question for Cristina, then one for Bill, and then one for you, Andy. We've got Matthew, Ed, and Peter and Bill all still online, which is really good. So I'm happy to open up the questions and opinions as we move forward. But I'll dive straight in, and it's a question for Cristina. Do you think the importance of system testing and certification is fully understood within the built environment?
Good one. In this region, huge strides have been made in that regard in the last few years. Are we done? No. They both, Andrew and Bill, have mentioned testing has a purpose, certification has a purpose, but that's not the end of the line. More is needed, more understanding of what the limitations are and what you can do with that. It's a great tool, don't get me wrong. Testing and certification plays a huge role, but it's not the only one. And in this region, thankfully, it seems like people are more and more aware of it every day. Authorities, having jurisdictions, have been enforcing testing and certification a lot more. I think there's a little bit more room. They've tended to go to the opposite, to the extremes. So a few years back, there wasn't a code, that wasn't something it was looked at, and now it's to the opposite. I do believe in a balance. We don't need to over-test. There's knowledge, there's engineering. That's part of the beauty of it. We know how certain things perform and work. So I think in the years coming forward, it's going to be about finding that balance and everybody becoming aware of the role it plays and the importance it has.
Thank you very much for that. I was getting a little bit, I'm not sure if it was from your microphone, but it sounded like there's a big bee in the room. Don't look behind you. Might be on the plants. But the next question was actually for Bill, and I was quite interested. There's one slide. This is my question actually, to do with documentation and record keeping, and it
Sure.
sort of quoted a period of 7 years. And my sort of question in relation to that is 7 years sufficient, or should the time span be for the life of the building or for the replacement of the system, pretty much to be in alignment with the fire strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Two answers to that. First one is the slide that was on was for the UL Qualified Contractor Program. FM, their 4991 program has the same limitation for the contractor, the fire stop contractor. The building owner and manager is required under that International Fire Code, NFPA 1, NFPA 101, UAE Fire and Life Safety Code. That documentation's got to stay with the building for the life of the building. So two different requirements, two different audiences for that particular requirement. And when it comes to, just to build on Cristina very quickly, what we're finding, in addition to the fire stop contractors, I also manage the National Fireproofing Contractors Association. What we're finding is still more education required of those that are buying, so that they understand the tested and listed systems and not just buying stuff. Thanks, Peter.
No problem. Thanks for the great answer, Bill. And a question for Andy in relation to incandescent paints. With the systems, I'm not going to put you to the point of a personal preference, but the question was, would you prefer a factory or site applied system? And what are the pros and cons for each system from your experience?
So, I mean, I would say there are several pros for a factory applied system. The pros for a factory applied system is number one, you ought to be able to get better quality records because the system is there in front of you. You should be able to inspect it in the factory. It's obviously, there's a health and safety implication because you haven't got people working at height spraying. And so there's two big ones there. And the third pro is that allegedly the production process goes quicker. And the final one is that as soon as your steel frame is erected, it's fire protected. So those are the big one. The big pro in terms of in terms of in terms of site applied systems is they tend that you don't necessarily need the durability with them because you can put them up as and when, and they're maybe a little bit cheaper to achieve. However, there is always the financial risk that in doing that, you're working with a smaller contractor, whereas there's more chance of having a larger factory installer still going financially. If you've got a problem 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, your original manufacturer and your installer, if it's a fabricator, will probably still be there. But you know, what chance of one man and a van still being there?
Yeah, from experience as well, you know, you do see the contractors generally not appreciating the fact that it is an intumescent paint system, and quite often, you know, you do get the damage, which is very obviously a very costly and potentially protection threatening issue. The next question is come from the audience, Shakil Ahmed. The first bit is more of a sort of a statement, but it leads into the question. Frame grouting is not mandatory as per HMMA and SDI for fire-rated doors and frames. This is not an installation issue? Question mark. Please clarify. I'll just put that open to the panel if anyone wants to pick up on that one.
I referenced grouted frames, so I think this is coming to me. In this case, it was a listing requirement, not so much an NFPA 80 requirement. The door had been tested with grouted frames, and without the grouting, it wouldn't have performed as it should. So that's where the grouting comes from, in that specific case that I mentioned.
Okay, that was actually the first question in, but I thought we'd warm up to that one, Cristina. Got a question coming from Terry. So again, I'll put it to the panel. It's how do you advise to get the message out and to preach to the non-converted regarding the importance of passive fire protection? Can we adopt the golden thread of information, communication and understanding of critical life safety systems for all concerned within the built environment? As currently there appears to be a tremendous gap from design and engineering through to material supply and installation, with also a massive gap in understanding by the owners and tenants. So if
Hi, Peter, if you don't mind, I'll hop in very quickly.
Please, Bill.
Really appreciate that question. I can tell you from the FCIA's perspective, we've been working with the specification community for the last 20, well, even before the association started in the late 80s, early 90s, to make sure that it's a crystal clear specification. They've done quite well, the professional specifiers throughout the passive industry, to try to make sure to communicate properly. Where things fall down, it seems, is when they're bought at the project site, whether it's the general contractor and others. So I will tell you, there's no magic bullet to fix this. It is a wide-ranging education program to the general contractor that they understand the liability they take on by not buying the proper systems, listings, and getting them installed, inspected, and there. The building owner, you know, if you talk to them about fire resistance, they'll almost give you a blank stare. Like, what do you mean fire? I have to maintain this stuff? Really? I think that's probably where we need to spend time as a team, all of us, whether it's Andy and the ASFP or Cristina and her company and the rest of the speakers, is working on that key building owner and manager crowd. Some building owner and manager building types, hospitals, for instance, that are regulated highly and have inspectors walking around looking at their passive fire protection, they pay attention, but some of the others do not. So it's the fire official, the building owner, the general contractor, and of course, other influences as well.
Thanks very much, Bill. If Peter and Ed and Matthew are still out, I'd like to sort of welcome them back to join us. We're very aware of time, and I did put some sort of pointers, sort of opinion, because it's an honour to have Peter with us today. He's doing a very, very important job within the industry. And maybe, Peter, there's a few little points that I raised earlier. Just wondered if maybe you could give some sort of information to the audience on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for the opportunity. And it follows on nicely from what Andrew Taylor was telling us, actually, because when that first point that you asked me to consider was about the IFE's involvement in the various working groups and industry forums and the subsequent knowledge and guidance that will result from these. And I'm sure everybody's aware that the tragic events in Grenfell Tower in 2017 were a bit of a watershed moment for the fire sector. Causing us all to really reflect on what went wrong and what we can do to put it right. And I've been accused of a bit of navel gazing sometimes when I've spoken about the Grenfell Tower public inquiry that's ongoing. But the fact of the matter is that I keep being shocked by what's being disclosed. I think really we have, at the very least, what we've got to do is make an effort to learn from what went wrong and try and put it right. So in terms of the involvement that the institutions had, well, in the immediate aftermath of the fire, the government pulled together an expert to provide advice to owners and occupiers of similar types of buildings. We had an input into that. Quite quickly after that, Dame Judith Hackett was commissioned by the Prime Minister to review the building regulations and fire safety. We played an active role in the consultation from the terms of reference, the draft report that she published, and then the final report. The Construction Industry Council, which is sort of a large overarching body of trade bodies of the construction sector in the UK, developed a myriad of working groups to take these ideas from Dame Judith Hackett forward. And the working groups, which are still very much active, looked at various, each one specialised in looking at a specific area of the construction sector. So IFE led on one of the working groups, which was looking at fire engineers. We were involved in another one looking at fire risk assessment. We were involved in another one looking at building control and regulation. And played an active role in professional engineers in the construction sector. And all this work developed a document called Setting the Bar. And now those working groups continue to look at implementing the recommendations that they put within that report. I think Andrew hinted at, if we could summarize in one word what all this is heading towards, it's about competence, isn't it? Everything that we're talking about now is about improving competence, whether that's competence of the individual, whatever their role is in designing, constructing and operating buildings, and the competence of companies. Just moving on from that, there are developments in legislation in the UK, the new fire safety bill, new building safety bill, creation of a regulator. The institution's been quite active in the consultations around that. And there is a British standard being developed. It's been developed rather quickly, and so it's using a new process in British Standards Institution called Flex. It's got its name is an overarching framework for building safety competence of individuals. So there's that word competence again. Now, please tell me if time's pressing. But Andrew also mentioned that,
moving on a bit, Peter, but it's it's really good that we are getting involved. Please carry on.
If I could just have perhaps 20 seconds just to sum up, because Andrew mentioned that competence has been defined as a combination of skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviours. I think we all understood competence as being skills, knowledge, and experience, but it's this behaviours bit that's of real interest. IFE strives to be the custodian of competence. It's all about what we do in the fire profession, and this behaviours part that's of real interest to us. So moving forward, all this work is heading towards having processes in place to ensure that whatever somebody's role is within the construction sector, that they can demonstrate their competence, and importantly, it's trying to tie in those behavioural aspects and ethical behaviours within that system. So, sorry, I probably took a bit too long in getting to the nub of the matter there. But if there's one thing learned over the last 3 years, it's competence and ethical behaviour.
Thanks very much for reaffirming that. I'd totally agree. I think the whole panel would as well. What I'd like to do now is obviously getting very close to time, and I'll hand back to Philip in a moment, but maybe just go around each panel member. Just maybe there was I think Andy mentioned it, it's come up in one of the questions with regard to the golden thread. I like the terminology if we're talking about one piece of advice, any sort of golden nuggets that the panel have got. So I'll go around, as was first on and it's late at night in New Zealand. I then ask what the time is. But before I ask what your piece of advice in regards to the passive, etc., is, your golden nugget, I'd just like to say that I saw the post you made yesterday with regard to the initiative in New Zealand for the fire engineering and getting sort of architects, designers to actually come out and actually see the sprinklers operating, see a fire. I actually think that's superb, so well done to you. And what is the one golden nugget that you would bring to the table, Ed?
Thanks, Pete. I think it's dedication to lifelong learning. I think, this whole issue of education for all of us, no matter how long you've been in the industry or what level you're at, requires ongoing learning. And I think this dedication to lifelong learning throughout your career, no matter what stage or level you're at, because things keep changing, the industries keeps changing, and it will continue to keep changing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And probably with the most experienced and longest serving in the room, I'll go to Bill next, because you've certainly demonstrated exactly what Ed said there.
Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate that. My thought is that the golden nugget is really that each industry, whether it's gypsum wallboard, concrete block, dampers, doors, fire-rated glazing, fire stopping, the whole passive package, really needs to focus on every piece of the DIIM. The installation, inspection, and maintenance seems to be lost. And who do we teach that to? That's to the architect engineer, to the general contractor that's building, the specialist contractors, to use Andy's acronym, ASFP, and then also to the building owner and manager. That Ed's point of lifelong education is just perfect, but it's got to flow up and down all the way up through the building life cycle, if you will. And with that, hopefully results in a safe building. Even you and I who occupy buildings ought to start demanding that the passive fire protection is there and it works every time we walk in.
Thanks very much, Bill. And Andy?
There was something I was going to say which sort of builds from the points that Peter made, and then the point that Bill made answering his last question on the golden thread. One of the key things that we've said we need in the UK is the key phrase is culture change, and we do need a culture change within the construction industry. And if you look at where we've talked about, we've talked at specialist contractor, specialist installer, we've talked about fire engineers, and there are these 12 working groups, which Peter's mentioned 3 or 4. I could mention the 3 or 4 that we get involved with, but one of the key things that we need to see within this culture change really is a drive to get the main contractors, the tier 1 contractors involved, because then if you look at who's been involved in the working groups, they're less involved. And if you look at where the specification, the procurement can fall down, it's at that tier 1 level where the level is still on the first focus is still on the bank balance maybe and this and those sorts of things. And we need to get people at that level involved, and we need to get them to be aware of what the requirements are so that we can get better buildings designed and constructed.
Thanks very much, Andy. And Cristina?
Thank you, Peter. So for me, building on what we've been discussing today, I think we all agree on what's needed. We've been discussing, well, the IIM, as we've mentioned. I think if we can all in the fire industry push for this culture change, this competence, make sure that we're all involved and pushing for this. I think the fire sector is a beautiful industry where we get to actually help and make it a big change. So I think if we can together push for that, we're talking from, as we said earlier, associations, manufacturers, installers, certification bodies, authorities. If we push together in the right way, I'm 100% sure we'll get there, but we need to push.
Thank you very much, Cristina. I couldn't second that anymore. And Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I guess my observation is I'm not sure whether to be surprised or not about the amount of consistency there is amongst ourselves today in this presentation, despite our regional separation and distances. I mean, it's unbelievably consistent, these themes that are running through everyone's presentation and these comments we're making now. So I think you know, that really is a good indicator that there is work to do if the experts in the field are adding to that. I guess my one takeaway would be that you know, building on what others have said, in particular Andrew, about the cultural change, is that we need more respect. And I think I remember reading in Hackett's, I think, interim report about her experiences in the chemical industry and how there's a respect for process in that industry that has existed for a long period of time, and everyone buys into it and the culture expects it to be there. We don't seem to enjoy the same culture in the fire protection industry at large, and hopefully the legacy of lives lost in this instance and other failures can turn that around. And just one other thing I'd like to add that I think has been really interesting in the last couple of years since these high profile incidents have shot fire back into the focus is that I think in the industry we talk a lot about life safety as the drive, but these high profile incidents have also taken life safety and then also thrust into the consciousness what the economic impact is and the interest of insurers and other stakeholders to continue to play in a marketplace if they don't have confidence. So we've got a responsibility there across the board, I think.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head of responsibility for us all. So thanks very much. And one final quick nugget from you, Peter.
Well, clearly going last, I'm not going to say anything original, am I? Thank you. I think really from me, I think we don't want to waste this opportunity. Before Grenfell, I got the impression, I think a lot of us got the impression that getting competent fire safety advice on a construction project was a bit of a grudge purchase. It was an unnecessary addition that design teams didn't want because it was affecting their budget, and perhaps we were called in if anything had gone wrong. Now everyone appreciates the value and the requirement for competent advice at all stages during the design, construction, and occupation phases of a building life cycle. And it's already been mentioned, but we really need to make this culture change stick so that the construction industry doesn't go back to its old ways, think too much about its making a profit, and we don't want to see a return to those bad habits. So let's keep banging the drum, and let's all keep learning from international experiences, such as you've brought together in this forum, Peter. Excellent work. Congratulations to Peter and the branch for putting this on. Wherever we are working in the world, we're experiencing the same problems and the same challenges. So learning from each other across the world is a fantastic opportunity.
Thanks very much for that, Peter. And hopefully, you know, we're in discussions with Philip and his team, and hopefully we can continue this this forum. So I think it does bring value, and you know, the sharing of knowledge and the expertise we've just got on this Q&A session here is absolutely phenomenal. So I'll stop now and pass back to Philip. So thank you all very much, and God bless.